The world had changed irrevocably on that fateful morning in October when the first reports of the infection surfaced in Boston. Emma Thompson stood at the window of her fortified apartment, watching the sun cast long shadows across the abandoned streets of what was once a bustling metropolis. It had been exactly 3 years since society crumbled, since the dead began to rise and feast upon the living. The 28-year-old former medical researcher now led one of the last surviving groups of humans in the northeastern United States, a responsibility she had never asked for but couldn't avoid. The safe zone they had established in an old military bunker housed 63 survivors, each carrying their own haunting stories of loss and survival. As Emma adjusted her worn leather jacket and checked her rifle, an urgent knock echoed through her room. It was Marcus Reynolds, their head of security and her most trusted friend since the outbreak began. His usually composed face bore an expression of barely contained anxiety as he burst through the door. "They've breached the outer perimeter," he reported, his voice tight with concern. "The horde we've been tracking for the past week, it's at least 3 times larger than we initially estimated." Emma's heart raced, but her voice remained steady as she activated the emergency broadcast system. The bunker came alive with activity as their carefully rehearsed evacuation protocols kicked into action. But this time was different. They had discovered something that could change everything. In the research lab below, Dr. James Walker had been working tirelessly on understanding the virus, and just yesterday he had made a breakthrough. The infected showed signs of cellular regeneration that could be manipulated, potentially leading to a cure. They couldn't lose this research, it was too valuable. Emma quickly organized their best fighters into teams. The first group, led by former Marine Lieutenant David Mitchell, would create a diversion to draw the horde away from their escape route. The second team, under Marcus's command, would escort the civilians and essential personnel through the underground tunnel network they had mapped out months ago. Emma herself would lead the third team to secure the research lab and transport the vital samples. As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, the distant sounds of gunfire and screams echoed through the concrete walls. The horde had broken through faster than expected, and the metallic stench of blood mixed with the musty underground air. Emma's team reached the lab to find Dr. Walker frantically packing his research materials. The power flickered ominously, and through the reinforced windows, they could see the first waves of infected stumbling through the compound's outer buildings. Time was running out. Just as they secured the last of the samples, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. Through their earpieces came David's strained voice. "The tunnel's been compromised. They're coming through from both sides." Emma's mind raced through their options, each one worse than the last. The research had to survive, but she couldn't abandon her people. Making a split-second decision, she divided their remaining ammunition among the team members. "New plan," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of command. "We're going to create a bottleneck in the main atrium. The civilians will use the service elevator to reach the roof where our backup helicopters are stationed." It was a risky plan. They had been saving the helicopters for an absolute emergency, and the noise would attract every infected within miles. But they were out of options. As Emma's team moved to their positions, she caught a glimpse of the chaos through the security cameras. The infected were different from what they had seen before, faster, more coordinated, almost as if they were evolving. Dr. Walker's voice shook as he shared his observation. "The virus is adapting, changing its hosts. These aren't the same creatures we've been fighting." The implications of his words sent a chill down Emma's spine. If the virus was evolving, their understanding of the infection would need to change too. Their fight for survival was about to enter a new phase, one that would test not only their strength and courage but their ability to adapt to an enemy that was learning to hunt them more effectively. As Emma readied her weapon and looked at the determined faces around her, she knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but possibly the future of human civilization itself. The atrium had become a war zone within minutes. Emma and her team held their position behind overturned tables and makeshift barriers as waves of infected crashed against their defenses. The evolved creatures moved with an unsettling intelligence, using fallen bodies as cover and attacking in coordinated surges. Through the chaos, Marcus coordinated the civilian evacuation, his voice steady over the radio despite the strain of their situation. The service elevator groaned under the weight of each group it carried to safety, its ancient mechanisms protesting with every journey. Dr. Walker worked frantically beside Emma, dividing his attention between protecting his precious research samples and documenting the infected's new behavior patterns. The observations were terrifying. These creatures were displaying pack mentality, with larger infected seemingly directing the smaller ones. A thunderous explosion rocked the building's foundation. Through the smoke emerged David Mitchell, his face streaked with blood and soot. "The east wing is gone," he reported grimly. "We had to detonate the charges early. They were climbing the walls, Emma. Actually climbing." The revelation sent a ripple of unease through the defenders. The infected had never shown such abilities before. As if to confirm their worst fears, a new sound cut through the gunfire, a high-pitched screech that made their bones vibrate. From the shadows emerged something that defied their understanding of the infection. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its mutated form rippling with grotesque muscle. Unlike the other infected, this one's eyes showed a cruel intelligence. "Alpha," Dr. Walker whispered, his scientific curiosity momentarily overwhelming his fear. "The virus has created a hierarchy." The creature's arrival changed the entire dynamic of the battle. Under its apparent command, the horde began to move with military precision, forcing Emma's team to retreat step by step. Their ammunition was running dangerously low, and the elevator could only carry 10 people at a time. They still had 23 civilians to evacuate. A crackle of static burst through their radios. It was Rebecca Anderson, their pilot on the roof. "We've got incoming. Multiple hordes converging on our position from all directions. The noise from the helicopters is drawing them in. We need to launch now or we'll lose our window." Emma made another split-second decision. "David, take half the remaining defenders and get to the roof. Start the evacuations immediately. We'll hold them here as long as we can." As David's team departed, Emma noticed Dr. Walker staring intently at his tablet. "What is it?" she asked, reloading her rifle with her last magazine. "The Alpha's biological signature," he replied, his voice filled with both wonder and horror. "It's not just commanding them, it's evolving them. The virus is using it as a catalyst to accelerate mutations in the entire horde." A plan began to form in Emma's mind. If the Alpha was the key to the horde's new abilities, then perhaps. Her thoughts were interrupted by Marcus's shout. The Alpha had launched itself across the atrium, landing with devastating force among their defenders. 3 of their people went down before anyone could react. Emma's rifle barked, the round striking the creature's mass with little effect. But she noticed something. Each time they wounded it, the surrounding infected seemed to falter momentarily. "The network goes both ways," Dr. Walker realized, reading the data streaming across his screen. "The Alpha's connection to the horde, it's a weakness we can exploit." Emma quickly reorganized their remaining defenders. They had one chance to turn this fight around, but it would require perfect timing and more than a little luck. As Marcus led another group of civilians to the elevator, Emma prepared to implement her desperate gambit. She caught a glimpse of the setting sun through the atrium's broken skylights, knowing that darkness would only make their situation more desperate. The Alpha was gathering its forces for another assault, its intelligent eyes fixed on their position with malevolent purpose. Emma checked her last magazine and shared a knowing look with Dr. Walker. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity had a fighting chance against this evolving threat, or if this would become their last stand in a world already lost to the dead. The plan was as dangerous as it was desperate. Emma had noticed that the Alpha's connection to the horde created a vulnerability, one they might exploit if they could separate it from its army of infected. Dr. Walker's readings confirmed her theory. The creature's biological signal weakened significantly when isolated. As the last civilian group made their way to the elevator, Emma put her strategy into motion. She divided their remaining defenders into 3 small teams, each armed with their precious few remaining incendiary devices. Marcus led the first team to the western corridor, while Emma positioned herself with the second team near the laboratory entrance. The third team, led by their demolitions expert Jackson Cooper, moved to secure their escape route. The Alpha watched their movements with predatory calculation, directing waves of infected to probe their defenses. The creature's intelligence made it all the more terrifying. It wasn't just surviving, it was learning. Through the radio, David's voice reported their situation on the roof. "First helicopter is away with 12 civilians. Second one's having mechanical issues. We're working on it, but we need more time." Time was the one thing they didn't have. The sun had fully set now, and emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the atrium. The infected moved like liquid darkness between the pillars, their movements becoming more coordinated with each passing minute. Emma gave the signal and Marcus's team launched their attack. Molotov cocktails arced through the air, creating a wall of flame that split the horde. The infected recoiled from the fire, their primal fear of flames temporarily overwhelming the Alpha's control. Dr. Walker's instruments went wild. "The connection's weakening," he shouted over the chaos. "The fire is disrupting their network." The Alpha released a bone-chilling roar, its massive form launching into action. Just as Emma had predicted, it moved to restore order among its minions, and in doing so isolated itself from the main group. Emma's team struck from the opposite side, their coordinated fire driving the creature further from its army. For a moment their plan seemed to be working. Then everything went wrong. The Alpha didn't retreat as expected. Instead, it charged directly at Emma's position, displaying a tactical awareness that none of them had anticipated. The creature crashed through their barricade like it was made of paper, sending defenders flying in all directions. Emma rolled away from a massive clawed hand, feeling the air displacement as it missed her by inches. Dr. Walker's voice cut through her radio, tinged with panic. "Emma, its biological readings, they're off the charts. It's adapting to our strategy." The creature had indeed adapted, using its own body to shield its subordinate infected from the flames. The horde began to move again with terrible purpose, threatening to overwhelm their remaining defenses. From above came the sound they'd been dreading, the distinctive moans of infected who had found their way to the roof. David's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got multiple breaches up here. The second helicopter's still not starting." Emma found herself backed into the laboratory with Dr. Walker, Marcus, and a handful of survivors. The Alpha had maneuvered them exactly where it wanted them, cutting off their escape routes one by one. But in doing so, it had made a crucial mistake. Through the laboratory windows, Emma could see the massive liquid nitrogen tanks they used for sample storage. A desperate plan formed in her mind. "Dr. Walker," she said, never taking her eyes off the approaching Alpha, "how do these evolved infected handle extreme cold?" The scientist's eyes widened as he understood her intention. "The virus shows significantly reduced activity at low temperatures. But Emma, if we rupture those tanks..." "We'll only get one chance at this," she interrupted, already moving toward the emergency release valve. The Alpha seemed to sense their intention, charging forward with frightening speed. Marcus and the remaining defenders opened fire, buying Emma precious seconds. The creature was mere feet away when she wrenched the valve open. A blast of supercooled air filled the laboratory, instantly dropping the temperature to lethal levels. The Alpha's roar turned into something almost human, a scream of rage and pain as its evolved flesh encountered temperatures it was never meant to survive. The liquid nitrogen transformed the laboratory into a frozen hell. Frost crystallized on every surface as the temperature plummeted, and the Alpha's massive form began to slow, its biological processes fighting against the extreme cold. Emma and the survivors retreated behind the safety of the containment doors, watching through reinforced windows as the creature's movements became increasingly sluggish. But their victory came at a terrible cost. The ruptured tanks had created a chain reaction, and the entire laboratory wing was rapidly becoming uninhabitable. Worse still, the freezing temperatures had damaged crucial equipment containing Dr. Walker's research. "The backup drives," he exclaimed, his breath visible in the rapidly cooling air. "We can't lose those samples." The sound of breaking glass above them shattered any hope of retrieving the equipment. The infected had breached the upper levels, and their inhuman shrieks echoed through the ventilation system. David's voice crackled through their radios, distorted by interference. "Second helicopter is running, but we've got infected rappelling down from the higher floors. They're using their own bodies as ropes, for God's sake." Emma looked at their dwindling group, Marcus nursing a badly wounded arm, Dr. Walker clutching his partially salvaged research, and 3 exhausted defenders. They had one path left, but it meant traversing the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the facility. The same tunnels they'd earlier discovered were compromised. Through the laboratory windows, they could see the Alpha still fighting against the cold, its flesh crackling with frost but its eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. More disturbing was the way the other infected were reacting, sacrificing themselves to form a barrier between their leader and the freezing air. "It's protecting itself," Dr. Walker observed, frantically documenting the behavior on his backup tablet. "The horde is literally dying to keep it alive." A massive impact shook the building's foundation. Jackson Cooper's voice came through their radios, tense but controlled. "The structural supports are failing. This whole place is coming down with or without our help. I've set the remaining charges. Give me the word and I'll bring it all down on their heads. Emma quickly assessed their options. The maintenance tunnels would be their only chance, but timing would be crucial. She keyed her radio. David, status on the roof? Last group is boarding now. We'll hold as long as we can, but these things, they're not stopping, Emma. They're climbing over their own dead to reach us. Another impact rocked the building. Through the frost-covered windows, Emma saw something that chilled her more than the liquid nitrogen ever could. The Alpha was adapting to the cold. Its flesh was changing, developing insulating layers before their eyes. Dr. Walker's instruments confirmed their worst fears. The virus. It's restructuring its host's biology in real time. We've never seen adaptation this rapid. Emma made her decision. Jackson, set the charges for 5 minutes. David, get that last helicopter in the air the moment your group is aboard. Everyone else, we're heading for the maintenance tunnels. Marcus, take point. They moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, the sounds of combat and infected growing more distant above them. The temperature began to rise as they left the laboratory section, but the relief was short-lived. The first maintenance tunnel access point was blocked by debris. The second was swarming with infected. They found their opportunity at the third entrance, but as Marcus pulled the access door open, a new sound reached their ears. The Alpha's roar had changed, it was closer and carried a note of triumph. It's free, Dr. Walker whispered, checking his readings. The cold? It forced it to evolve again. We've made it stronger. The building shuddered around them as Jackson's charges began their countdown. Emma helped her people through the access point one by one, knowing they were running out of time. As she prepared to follow them into the tunnel, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. There, at the end of the corridor, stood the Alpha. Its flesh had transformed into something new, something armored against the cold. But it was its eyes that held her attention. They showed not just intelligence now, but purpose. The creature wasn't just hunting them anymore. It was waging a war. The maintenance tunnel stretched before them like the arteries of a dying beast, emergency lights casting red shadows that made every corner look like it was bleeding. Emma sealed the access door behind them, knowing it wouldn't hold the Alpha for long. The creature's evolved form had proven more terrifying than any of them had imagined. Through their earpieces, they heard David confirm the final helicopter's departure, followed by Jackson's terse update on the charges. 3 minutes until detonation. The tunnel network was a maze of intersecting passages, most of them partially flooded from years of neglect. The water slowed their progress, reaching knee-height in some sections. Dr. Walker kept checking his tablet, which now showed alarming readings from above. The Alpha's biological signature is changing again, he reported, his voice tight with concern. It's not just adapting anymore, it's optimizing. Every challenge we throw at it makes it more efficient. A distant splash echoed through the tunnels, followed by the sounds of multiple bodies hitting water. The infected had found their way into the network. Marcus took point, his injured arm tucked close to his body as he guided them through the labyrinth. His years as head of security had given him intimate knowledge of these passages, but even he looked uncertain at some of the intersections. The structural damage has changed the layout, he admitted, studying a junction where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Some of these routes might not exist anymore. A metallic screech pierced the air, reverberating through the tunnels. The Alpha was tearing its way down to them. Emma could hear the creature's progress, the sound of rending metal growing closer with each passing second. 2 minutes until detonation. They reached a chamber where several tunnels converged, the water level dropping to ankle depth. Ancient pumping equipment lined the walls, creating shadows that seemed to move in the emergency lighting. Dr. Walker suddenly grabbed Emma's arm, his eyes wide with realization. The water, he whispered. That's how they're tracking us. The Alpha's evolved form, it's using chemical traces in the water to follow our path. As if to confirm his theory, an inhuman howl echoed through the tunnels, closer than ever. The infected were moving faster now, their splashing footsteps creating a horrifying symphony that seemed to come from all directions. Emma made a quick decision. Marcus, get Dr. Walker and his research to the secondary rendezvous point. Take Thompson and Rivera with you. She turned to the remaining defender, Michael Hayes, a former SWAT officer. You're with me. We're going to give them something else to chase. Marcus started to protest, but Emma cut him off. The research has to survive. Everything we've learned about these creatures, it might be our only chance to stop them. Go. Now. 1 minute until detonation. Emma and Hayes moved in the opposite direction, making as much noise as possible in the water. The alpha's roar changed pitch, becoming more focused, more hunting. Was following them. Through their earpieces they heard Jackson's final warning. 30 seconds. They reached another junction, this one leading to a maintenance shaft that rose toward the surface. Hayes checked his ammunition, 3 rounds left. Emma had 2. Above them they could hear the alpha tearing through the infrastructure, getting closer with each passing second. The infected weren't just following anymore, they were hurting them, cutting off escape routes with tactical precision. 15 seconds. Emma looked at Hayes, saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt. They had drawn the creatures away from the others, but now they were trapped. The alpha's massive form appeared at the far end of the tunnel, its evolved body barely recognizable as something that had once been human. Its flesh had developed armor-like plates, and its limbs had elongated into weapons. But it was the intelligence in its eyes that truly terrified. It knew they were trapped, and it was savoring the moment. 5 seconds. The creature tensed to spring, its army of infected moving into position behind it. Emma raised her weapon, knowing it would make little difference. Above them, the first of Jackson's charges detonated. The tunnel ceiling began to crack. The alpha launched itself forward just as the world came crashing down. The last thing Emma saw was Hayes throwing himself at the creature, buying her the precious seconds she needed to reach the maintenance shaft. Then darkness took everything. Consciousness returned to Emma slowly, accompanied by the taste of dust and copper. She found herself wedged in the maintenance shaft, protected from the main collapse by a fallen support beam. Hayes was gone, his sacrifice giving her these precious moments of life. The sound of shifting rubble echoed through the darkness, accompanied by something else, a rhythmic scratching that made her blood run cold. The alpha had survived. Through gaps in the debris she could see movement. The creature was digging, its evolved form even more grotesque than before. The collapse had crushed parts of its armor plating, but the virus was already adapting, rebuilding its host's body with terrifying efficiency. Emma's radio crackled weakly in her ear. Through the static she caught fragments of Marcus's voice. They had made it to the rendezvous point with Dr. Walker and his research. But the message carried a new warning. The collapse had driven dozens of infected to the surface, and they were converging on the survivor's position. Emma checked her surroundings. Her rifle was lost in the cave-in, but her combat knife remained strapped to her leg. The shaft continued upward, leading to what her mental map suggested would be the old water treatment facility. If she could reach it, she might find a way to help the others. The scratching grew louder. The alpha had caught her scent. Emma began her climb, trying to move as silently as possible despite her injuries. The shaft was narrow, forcing her to navigate around broken pipes and electrical conduits. Below, she could hear the creature systematically destroying obstacles in its path. It wasn't just hunting her now, it was problem-solving. She reached a horizontal section of the shaft where several pipes had burst, creating a small flood. The water was ankle-deep and freezing. As she waded through it, her boot struck something solid. Reaching down, she felt the distinctive shape of a maintenance worker's tool belt, complete with a heavy wrench and what felt like a flare gun. The alpha's claws punctured the shaft below her position, ripping through metal like paper. Emma could see its evolved eyes through the holes, tracking her movement. The creature had adapted to the darkness, developing some form of enhanced vision. She had seconds at most. The flare gun felt heavy in her hand as she checked its chamber. One shot. The alpha tore away another section of the shaft, its massive form coiling to strike. But in doing so, it revealed something crucial: exposed pipes running along the tunnel wall behind it. Emma recognized the hazard markings even in the dim light. Natural gas lines. The creature lunged just as Emma fired the flare. The burning projectile sailed past the alpha's head, striking the pipes behind it. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Emma was thrown backward by the blast wave, tumbling through the flooded shaft until she struck a grate. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the alpha's roar change from triumph to rage, then to something approaching pain. When her vision cleared, she saw why. The explosion had collapsed part of the tunnel, separating her from the creature. More importantly, the blast had ruptured several water mains, creating a torrent that was rapidly flooding the lower tunnels. The alpha was trapped on the other side, and for the first time, Emma saw something like fear in its intelligent eyes. The water was rising fast, and even its evolved form needed to breathe. Emma's radio sparked to life again, clearer this time. Marcus had led the survivors to an abandoned subway station, but they were surrounded. The infected that had escaped to the surface were coordinating without the alpha, suggesting the virus had evolved beyond needing a single leader. Dr. Walker's voice cut through the transmission. Emma, if you can hear this, the water treatment facility. The samples we recovered suggest the virus can't survive certain chemical combinations. If we can flood the tunnels with treated water. She understood immediately. The facility's purification systems might still contain the chemicals they needed. If they could activate the pumps, they might not just escape, they could eliminate the infected in the tunnel network entirely. The Alpha slammed against the debris separating them, but the water was already chest-high on its massive form. Emma saw the calculation in its eyes. It could either pursue her or survive. With a final roar that shook loose debris from the shaft walls, the creature turned and began moving toward higher ground. Emma started climbing toward the treatment facility, knowing she had minutes at most to reach the controls. The race wasn't over, it had only entered its final phase. The water treatment facility loomed above Emma like a cathedral of rust and decay. She emerged from the maintenance shaft into a vast chamber filled with ancient purification tanks and control systems. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights, casting strange shadows across dormant machinery. Her radio crackled with increasingly desperate reports from Marcus. The infected had breached the subway station's outer defenses, and Dr. Walker's makeshift barricades wouldn't hold much longer. Emma raced to the main control room, her footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. Years of emergency training helped her identify the crucial systems: chemical storage levels, pump controls, water pressure regulators. But bringing them back online would take time they didn't have. As she worked, a familiar sound froze her blood. The Alpha had found another way up. The creature crashed through a far wall, its evolved form now even more adapted to their battle. Its flesh had developed gills, allowing it to survive the flooded tunnels. More terrifying still, it had grown some kind of organic sonar system, likely copied from marine predators. The virus was no longer just adapting, it was innovating. Emma threw the first switch, and ancient pumps groaned to life beneath her feet. The Alpha paused its advance, cocking its head at the sound. Through her radio, Dr. Walker's voice carried a mix of fear and scientific fascination. The infected are changing their attack pattern. They know something's coming. The hive mind, it's warning them. The creature charged just as Emma reached the chemical control panel. She dove behind a concrete pillar as claws raked the air where she had stood. The Alpha was learning from each encounter, becoming more strategic. It wasn't trying to kill her immediately, it was cutting off her escape routes, forcing her into a corner. Another transmission cut through the static. Marcus had led some of the infected away from the station, buying Dr. Walker time to reach a secure position with his research. But the Horde was adapting to their tactics, using the subway tunnels to outflank them. Emma had one chance. The chemical tanks above held enough purification compounds to make the water lethal to the virus, but releasing them required activating a manual override. The controls were on the other side of the room, past the Alpha's position. The creature seemed to sense her intention. It moved to guard the controls, its intelligent eyes never leaving her. Then Emma saw it, a pressure gauge on the wall, connected to one of the smaller chemical tanks. One well-placed shot would rupture it, creating a diversion. But her pistol was empty. The Alpha tensed to spring, its massive form coiling like a serpent. In that moment, Emma made her choice. She broke cover, running not toward the controls but toward the creature itself. The Alpha's attack missed as she slid beneath its grasp, using the momentum to grab the heavy wrench she had carried from the tunnels. The creature spun with impossible speed, but Emma was already swinging the wrench at the pressure gauge. The tank burst, spraying chemical compounds across the room. The Alpha recoiled instinctively, giving Emma the seconds she needed to reach the controls. She threw the final switch just as the creature recovered. Throughout the facility, pumps roared to full power. Treated water began flooding the tunnel network, carrying its lethal chemical cocktail to every corner of the underground system. The Alpha realized the danger too late. It lunged for Emma, but the first waves of treated water were already rising through the floor grates. Where the chemical-laden liquid touched the creature's evolved flesh, it began to dissolve. The Alpha's roar turned into something almost human, a sound of desperation and defeat. Through her radio, Emma heard cheers. The infected in the subway tunnels were falling, their bodies breaking down as the treated water reached them. The virus that had nearly destroyed humanity was being destroyed by one of humanity's most basic innovations, water purification. The Alpha made one final attempt to reach her, its dissolving form still driven by that terrifying intelligence. But its evolved abilities were now its weakness, the enhanced flesh more vulnerable to the chemicals. Emma watched as the creature that had haunted her nightmares collapsed into the rising water, its eyes showing something like recognition in its final moments. recognition that humanity had finally outmatched its evolution. Hours later, Emma stood with the survivors at their fallback position. Dr. Walker was already analyzing samples of the treated water, talking excitedly about replicating the solution on a larger scale. Marcus clasped her shoulder, no words needed between them. They had lost good people, but they had gained something precious: hope. For the first time since the outbreak began, humanity had a weapon against the infected. The war wasn't over, but the tide had finally turned. Through the ashes of their old world they would build something new. Something stronger. They would reclaim their world one battle at a time.